Okay, good morning. My name is Curtis Campbell. I'm a Senior Marketing Manager for Hughes. This year I had the opportunity to attend DSE, and while I was nerding out over some of the latest technology, I wanted to kick things off this morning with a few things that I saw. First of all, number one, there were lots of excitement, lots of people, and more importantly, there were screens everywhere. There were huge booths, small booths, medium-sized booths, lots of cool technology on display. However, what was more telling to me was the type of foot traffic at DSE this year. Rather than being there to see the latest screen technology, the lion's share of those we spoke with and had chances to meet with were laser focused on how to better capture the attention of their audience with engaging software. While screens large and screens small can be flashy, if there's nothing of value being displayed, we have to ask what good is the technology. I had the opportunity to speak with several customers as well as general audience people in both the public and private sectors, and more specifically the educational and retail industries. They came to us looking for ways to better engage their students, customers, and employees. The next thing, which, this is more the nerding out side of things, was the importance of mobile integration. Although this is relatively in its infant stages in the digital signage world, I did see that there's a great need to have signage that integrates with the mobile experience. A lot of us know, or maybe some of us don't know, that about 80% of U.S. residents own some kind of a smartphone or device. And furthermore, research has shown that messages that show up on billboards or other out-of-home advertising helps prime mobile interactions more than any other traditional media outlet. With that said, mobile technology and furthermore the integration of that technology, digital signage can deepen its relationship and create immersive brand experiences. But let's be honest, you're not here to listen to me. I am joined here by Dave Haynes and Mike Tippets, both whom are very experienced digital signage experts. Dave Haynes is the founder and editor of the 16:9 blog. He's a well-known figure in the digital signage and digital out-of-home sector. He runs a pair of companies, the Preset Group and Presto, and Mike Tippets is the Vice President of Hughes Global Media Solutions Group, a product and solution division of Hughes. He is responsible for the development of managed services, software applications, and solutions based on the Hughes Digital Media Products and Technologies platform. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Haynes, and then he'll be followed up by Mike Tippets to wrap things up, and we'll try to do a little bit of Q&A during the presentation as well as at the end. So Dave, take it away.
Okay, good morning everyone. Thanks for jumping on the call. I have been to Digital Signage Expo a whole bunch of times. I've been going since 2005, so I'm pretty familiar with the event and know a lot of the people who go there. And as a consultant and a blogger, but not an end user or somebody who sells this stuff, I probably come at the show from a different perspective from perhaps a lot of people do. And frankly, I'm a little bit jaded because I've been to a whole bunch of shows and seen a whole bunch of stuff, so it's a little harder perhaps to kind of knock my socks off with stuff. But here's what I did see this year, and I think is worth talking about. First and foremost, as soon as you walked into the trade show hall, you were going to see OLED displays. Now, organic light emitting displays or diodes or whatever they're called, OLEDs, have been around for many, many years. I remember seeing them probably 7, 8, 9 years ago at CES. At that point, they were just demonstration displays, fairly small, and people would look at them and go, well, that's really interesting, but I wonder if that will ever see the light of day. They've slowly been coming along. In the last couple of years, you've started to see OLED consumer-grade TVs start to appear on the market. And just in the past 6 months or so, some of the display manufacturers have started to show commercial-grade OLED displays and start to attach prices and shipping dates to them. They look pretty darn amazing. The richness of color, but probably more than anything else, the thinness of them and the ability to do things like make them transparent and make them wavy so that they actually look like kind of a limp lasagna noodle. It's a hard description, but they are only, let's say, a 1/4 inch thin if you have one, maybe 1/2 inch if you have two back-to-back, if that. and you can genuinely do 2 displays back-to-back that look beautiful. The most interesting thing I've seen with these OLEDs is probably the transparent ones, and Planar and Samsung, and I believe LG also, but certainly Planar and Samsung have transparent OLEDs that look pretty fantastic. If you can imagine like just a glass window that you can see through, you have 90% of the ability to see through it. You can see sort of a faint haze. But all of a sudden that window just lights up with very rich full motion colors. That's the sort of thing that happens with this stuff. The best application I saw of it at the show was with Planar that stacked 2 of these 55-inch transparent OLEDs in portrait mode, one on top of the other, in front of a mannequin, and then they were showing information about the mannequin. At ISE in Amsterdam about a month ago, Samsung was showing a 4-pane window with transparent OLEDs, and it looked like a window on a house or something. All of a sudden, the window came alive. It was pretty darn impressive, but there are some caveats to all that. First of all, they're incredibly expensive. A 55-inch transparent OLED is going to cost you $15,000. They're now shipping, but obviously at that price, there's not a whole bunch of buyers yet. There are other issues around them. If you can think in terms of the early days, if you remember, of plasma displays, they had some issues with image retention where if you had something like a fixed channel and a logo on the screen and it stayed on there for a long time, that logo would start to burn in. That same sort of thing is applying to OLEDs right now. But they're also, because they're organic materials, and I can't explain the science, but they're organic, they are subject to UV light, just in the same way that let's say a bright red sofa in the back room of your house that gets a lot of sunlight, if you leave it there, that bright red sofa is going to start to become more of a dusty rose and down to a pink over time. The same thing is going to happen to OLED displays if they are kind of out in a lot of UV light. So it's still the early days for this technology. I think it's a fair assumption that it's going to get better in terms of some of those technical issues, but they already look amazing. Next thing that struck me, and it struck me for the last, let's say, 2 years, but it's really, really coming on now, are indoor LED displays. Let's say 2-3 years ago, they were very much a niche kind of demonstration product that you would see on big video walls at trade shows, but not really anywhere else. Now they are fully coming onto the market. There are, I would say, probably 24 at least manufacturers selling these indoor LED displays, and all the majors now have them on their lists of products. So you've got Samsung, you've got LG, you've got Planar, you've got a lot of the folks that have these indoor LEDs, and these are not like the LEDs that you think of for digital billboards or even the nanolumens product that you may have seen at shows that are very thin, but still you need to be a fair distance away for the picture to kind of pull together properly. These are fine pixel pitch LEDs where the distance between the LEDs themselves is as small as 0.9 millimeters, so almost like the width of a hair. So even up fairly close, these things look great, and if you get back 10 feet, they look pretty darn fantastic, and they start to compete with very large LCD displays. Why they're interesting is you get around some of the boundaries that traditional video walls have in terms of them just being rectangles. You could do long sort of ribbon strips. Some of the LEDs are flexible. You can start to do things like wrap them around columns and so on. So there's a lot of opportunity for integrators to do visually interesting things. But just like OLEDs, there's a bit of an issue there in that right now they are very, very costly when you get down to the finest of the pixel pitch ones. I asked around when I was at the show, and I was told that a 1.2 millimeter, at least from one of the manufacturers, was $36,000 per square meter. So if you extrapolate that out to a very large video wall display in a shopping mall or something like that, that's $250,000 or something. So it needs to come down. But if you are in an environment where you don't need people up really close, if they're going to be, let's say, 25 feet away or something like that, you could use a 2.5 millimeter fine pixel pitch display, and that's only going to cost you $7,000 a square meter, so a lot less cost. But even at that, it's still going to be more expensive than mainstream conventional LCD video wall displays that, if you've been in the digital signage business for a while, you know all about. With those displays, every year I go to DSE, the bezels, the seams between the displays get a little bit more narrow. They now call them extreme narrow bezel or super narrow bezel. I think the challenge of these seams between the LCD panels was largely resolved 2 or 3 years ago at least. The seams got down to a point where at any kind of a distance they really didn't matter, but it's a bit like computers and all kinds of other technologies where there's always this race based on specs and how can we make this a little bit thinner, and that will be our key selling proposition for this particular thing. I do think video walls have an issue, and they're going to start to be marginalized by indoor LED as the prices come down, just because you have a little bit more flexibility in design and so on, but they still very much have a role, and for now they're way more cost-effective than an indoor LED is going to be. But over time, I think you'll see that mass adoption. Another thing that has struck me over the past few months, really, and was certainly reinforced at DSE, was the whole idea of system-on-chip displays. These are flat panel displays, commercial-grade displays, that have a media processor, effectively a smartphone computer embedded in the actual panel. So if you can think of them as a giant 55-inch tablet almost without the touch overlay. What it does is remove the cost of an external media player, an external PC. The panels do cost a little bit more, but incrementally not as much as it would be typically for an additional media device, and it also theoretically at least removes a point of failure. These things are solid state, so they really shouldn't fail. Those SoC displays, those system-on-chip displays, started coming on the market in 2013 through Samsung. They really first showed up at ISE in Amsterdam, and then a few weeks later at DSE in Las Vegas. At that time, a lot of companies were looking at Samsung and going, okay, what are they doing here? Is this just a way to repurpose some smart TVs that they hadn't sold and sell them as smart commercial panels? So there was a fair amount of skepticism. There was a bit of a challenge in terms of developing to Samsung's proprietary system, and it was reasonable to wonder if this would stick around or it would just kind of go away. But 3 years later, you have LG, another large manufacturer with its own version of system-on-chip displays, again with its own proprietary system that you have to develop to. And you now, in the last few weeks, have seen Panasonic and Philips both introduce system-on-chip displays. Interestingly enough, these run Android and are significantly more open, so that if you already have a CMS that develops to Android media players, it's relatively simple to port your media player, your software media player, onto these Android open media players. So what you now have are most of the major players offering system-on-chip displays, and going back to Samsung, virtually every professional panel they make, from very small to super large, all have these SoCs built into them. So rather than it being a kind of a curiosity 3 years ago, I would say it's now a thing. It's part of the ecosystem. It's part of the sort of spectrum of choices that you would make for putting a digital display in. I mentioned Android. Let's say 3-4 years ago, Android was very much a novelty. There was a lot of excitement and curiosity about Android because it enabled you to use a very low-cost media device, sub 200, quite possibly sub 100 if you're willing to take a risk on Chinese set-top boxes and media sticks that may change from every time you get a new one shipped to you. A lot of companies start to develop to it. I would say in the range of 40 to 50 to 60, the way I was tracking it on my blog. And over time, that has matured. A lot of the challenges that exist with Android have gone away. It's stabilized. It's now at a point where the operating system does all the things that it needs to do for digital signage, which has been a challenge because it's really not developed for digital signage. It's developed for billions of smartphones. I would say now you're no longer seeing content management software companies or really anybody else talking about Android purely from the basis of, hey, we're doing this, hey, it's really cheap and everything else. It's now just part of the suite. And you have software companies who have very much settled and are comfortable with Android, and they're marketing it to budget-conscious end users and integrators who say, I've got a client, but they don't want to spend any more than $120 on a media player, and that's not going to work with a PC. That might work with a Google Chrome OS device, depending on what it is, but it fills that niche, and it's kind of settled in as part of the market. The software guys in digital signage, what I noticed this year is they seem to be kind of settling in more in terms of what they're offering. One of the challenges I've always had in going to this show, and I've asked lots of end users who've wandered in and looked around and come out of the show and said, are you confused? And they said, oh yeah, because pretty much every booth they went to said the same things about what they did, what they offered. Now you're starting to see software companies differentiate themselves and say, this is the market we serve, this is a vertical that we're really strong in. Good example is, the company I'm on the call with. They are very much focused on the workplace. They certainly do other things, but they have front of house and back of house workplace applications, which I think is a really smart thing to do because it kind of lays it down that this is our place, this is our tribe, these are the people who we work with primarily. We can do that other stuff, but we know business, we know the workplace. I think you're going to see more and more and more companies go that way because they really, really have to. If they remain as generalist kinds of software platforms that say, we do digital signage, what do you need it to do? That gets them into a competition with a whole bunch of other companies that are just saying the same thing and probably pushes them into a price war. And you really don't want to be into a commoditized price battle because it's only a race to zero. I mean, there are already platforms out there that really don't cost anything and are reasonably good in their own ways. The other thing I noticed was even though every year people talk about how important content is to digital signage, we're really still not seeing this as a content show. It's still very much a gadget and gearhead show. I would say there were maybe half a dozen to 10 companies who would start out saying they do creative, and that may be more than there actually were in terms of exhibitors on the floor. And the net result is you have a show that's full of gadgets and displays and mounting brackets and distribution gear and so on, and you have end users who the show desperately wants to have walking through there, not terribly being inspired by really great work. If you go to the education sessions, you're going to hear about some really great work, but you're going to see it on a PowerPoint slide and it's going to go by in a flash. It would be great to see more about what's really going on in the space, how people are applying digital signage? What are they doing creatively that's different? And I think that's a challenge that DSE really needs to address going forward, because my sense is some of the major exhibitors, let's set aside the display guys and the mount guys who are probably always going to be there, but a lot of not a lot of the software guys, but some of the software guys and some of the other kind of secondary exhibitors, if you want to call them that, they dropped off in the past year, and I wonder if more are going to drop off, because a catch-all show that just says digital signage, I don't know if I'm an end user that I'm going to make a decision that I need to go to that. A lot of end users and even systems integrators and agencies in particular, they don't think in terms of digital signage. They think in terms of a problem, a challenge, and looking for ways to resolve that. And they figure it out themselves. They may find the technologies they need to use, but I'm not convinced they decide, okay, I need to go to a digital signage show. They'll help me figure all this out. All that said, from my perspective, I think it remains a very, very good show for me. It's incredibly useful and efficient in terms of seeing a whole bunch of technologies, a whole bunch of companies, business partners, clients, everything else. And I know for a lot of other people, be they systems integrators or software providers or display guys, it's very handy for them, because it's an efficient gathering as opposed to traveling all over the country to see people. They're all there in one place. You can schedule those meetings and everything else. So from that point of view, whether you are an end user, somebody who's just getting into the space, an integrator, or a vendor, I think it remains a valuable few days to spend in Las Vegas, particularly if you're getting out of cold weather.
All right, well, perfect. We did have a question that I think is definitely applicable to you, Dave, before we turn it over to Mike. Talk to us a little bit about Chrome and how Chrome OS is going to be making a play into the digital signage world.
Sure, yeah. I know some of the Google folks, spent some time with them. That's an evolving product, I would say. I don't think it's unfair at all to say they're still kind of figuring it out. And you saw that 2-3 months ago when Google changed its device management licensing scheme, when and that device management license is how they make money. They don't make any margin off of Chrome boxes or Chrome bits or anything else. They have to sell software licenses in order for them to make money out of digital signage right now. So previously they were charging $50 a year for device management, or $150 perpetual license. That device management was originally designed for enterprise accounts and for big school districts and things like that, and there's a lot in there that isn't terribly relevant or needed by a single-use device like a kiosk or a digital signage display. So what they did when they released the Chrome bits, which are these little HDMI sticks, is they changed the pricing scheme so that those single-use devices, the licensing is $2 a month. So for that, you get pretty solid, thorough, basic but good device management for a display. And that's important because you have increasingly not only software companies but interactive agencies and developers developing something in JavaScript and HTML5, making it into a URL and dropping it onto a playback device and running it as some sort of a signage application. The challenge with that has been that you don't know what's going on at the endpoint, whether it's even on. So if you can apply device management to it, all of a sudden you have some control. You can get screenshots, you can issue remote reboot commands and do things like that that are critically important to digital signage. So, like I said, I think Google is still kind of figuring it out. They've got a pretty interesting ecosystem of software partners and integrator partners, and they have dedicated people to it. So I get a kick out of some of the quote-unquote veterans. Well, that sounds like, I don't mean they're not veterans, but people who've been around the space for a long time, who have their own software have their own way of doing things, who are pretty dismissive of what Google is doing and believe that they will be like a Cisco and come into the space and get out of it. I don't personally think that's going to happen, and I think it borders on naive to think it will happen. There are reasons for them to be here. And just as a parallel to that, I think it's also interesting that you're starting to see some other big companies who have a reason to be here start to dabble in the space, notably Adobe, which was showing some signage applications at its big summit in Las Vegas this week.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for that. Tip, do you have anything to add to that, or do you want to, if you want to just take it from here?
Sure, appreciate that. No, and I think I would echo many of the things that David said, not just because he's smarter than me, but because I happen to have made some of the same notes. But you know, the screens are it's always fun to see all the new screen technologies, and this year the curves and the overhangs and things that they had were just absolutely phenomenal. And digital wallpaper. There was one very small company called Vital Signs. They actually had a booth very close to ours, and their technology allows you to take screens, and as you mount them, you could overlap them, and then their technology kept everything in frame sync and looked like it was smooth across all these screens. And I spent the entire first day of the show staring at that, wondering why would anybody hang their screens so poorly, and you know, what are they trying to compensate for? And so the morning of the second day, I thought, well, I'm going to walk over here and just kind of chat this guy up and get his pitch. And candidly, as I got closer to their booth, it hit me. They were making it possible for you to create a digital display that had depth and texture. So now you could take these 22, they were using 22, 24, 26-inch monitors, some landscape, some portrait, and they had mounted them in such a way where it almost felt like art. And so, you know, again, I thought, well, that is, I believe, a progression in this industry where we're realizing that communication and impact needs to have far more than just, you know, rich color and pretty pictures, that there needs to be a little bit more to it in the way of texture and so forth. So I was really impressed by that. I do agree heavily with David on the system on the chip. You know, I've been coming to Digital Signage Expo since 2004, like David. We've seen a lot come through. Early on, the manufacturers of screens and monitors, they were trying to shove a baby PC up inside their screen to make it an all-in-one. And at the time, they were thick enough that you could really do that. Of course, now as they're getting thinner and thinner, that becomes a little more difficult and challenging. And they've also realized, as David pointed out, really they don't need to put a whole PC up in there. They just need to get a processor that can work through some of these media types, and then put the work or the opportunity really back onto the content management systems and software applications. So I thought those were interesting things. But for me, and it may very well be because this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, I felt like there was a lot of conversation happening about corporate communication and, you know, in a nutshell, back of house digital signage, backwards facing digital signage. Now, our company and our product line, we've been heavily working in this space for a number of years now. So again, I may be a tad more sensitive to it than the average, but I heard a lot of booths giving lip service, and then I heard a lot of attendees asking seriously. And what I know from experience and what I believe was causing these questions was, you can put screens out on the retail floor, and candidly, it's getting to a point where you about have to stay relevant, but the ROI proof point gets a little cloudy still. But when you put a screen in the back of house and communicate with your employees and their behavior changes, you have an immediate ROI. You have an immediate uplift in value. And so I was excited to hear how the attendees and the conversations were really starting to circle in, not so much at the expense of front of house, but in addition to, and you know, the concept that content is important and making my employees aware. You know, there's terms like employee engagement and so forth that are well written about, but that digital media, digital signage is meant to influence target audiences, depending on where you put it and where you are, well, employee base is a key target audience, and so I was very excited about it. And then, again, last on my list of things here today, I like the Chrome concept too. I came to Digital Signage Expo this year fully expecting to see a show that was one half Google and the rest of it all the rest of us. They were there in a very large way last year, and they made a very, very big impact. And I know that they've been very busy. But what I saw this year was a mid-sized booth and information, but they had the Google at Work team out working the floor. We had meetings with them, and I'm sure lots of other vendors did. And I am encouraged. David's already talked about, kind of how Chrome, the Chrome OS, and everything's coming in to be reality. And as a manufacturer and a vendor, I'm very bullish on what it will bring to us. So I was excited by that, enjoyed that, and those were some of the highlights that I saw. Curtis?
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. While both of you have been chatting, we've had a couple more questions come through, and I kind of can lob these up to either one of you to answer. But the question here is, where is the digital signage market going over the next 12 to 36 to even 60 months?
I can start with that at least. It's a very big question. It's going to evolve. Things are going to get thinner. Things are going to get cheaper. The OLEDs and the indoor LEDs that right now are extraordinarily expensive will not be. You will see, I think, more development of small devices, low-cost devices like Chrome bits, like DCs on sticks, and on and on. And I think you will see the inevitable that there will be a thinning, so to speak, of the herd when it comes to the software companies. There are way more software companies in this business than there is demand for software CMSs. I believe that those companies who nicely define what they're doing and so on will be okay, particularly those that are have good solid financial backing. But there's a whole raft of companies that I know are quietly for sale. I know have investors who are frustrated because there's just too many, and because there's that much competition, prices coming down. You are already starting to see some M&A activity. Just last week, a company up my way called AdFlow Networks was acquired by a big LED board company, Actronics, and at first blush you'd look at that and go, that doesn't make a whole bunch of sense. But when you talk to them, you start to understand what's going on, and you can see the rationale behind AdFlow, thinking in order for us to stay relevant, to have a big partner that's got a whole bunch of salespeople and a whole bunch of resources behind it can only help us. So I think you're going to see more and more and more of that.
And I would jump in and say what I see happening is, call it an evolution, a next generation, but it's the simplification. When I talk to people in a consultative role, as well as just potential customers and people looking at technologies, one of the biggest hurdles that we deal with currently is their fear of complexity. Their fear that in order to operate this signage system, whether it's 25 screens around a corporate building or 2,500 screens across a distributed network, they're concerned that the complexity of operating it and so forth will be a hindrance because they know they don't have the headcount. They're not going to get headcount immediately to dedicate it, and so there's a hesitancy there. So I believe that you'll see certainly over the next 12 to 18 and going forward, a really big push on the software providers and manufacturers to make it simple, to Apple it, again, to make it so that you click and there's fewer clicks and it's easier to get done and it's easier to visualize and do. So I really think that's a big part of it.
Okay, perfect. One final question. We're just about out of time, but one final question again to loft to both of you is, we're seeing the rise of cloud-based CMS becoming more and more accessible and more popular. But how else do you guys see, outside of beyond just cloud-based CMS, how else is cloud going to be accenting the digital signage world?
I'll step in on that one. First of all, respect to the person asking the question, I don't think that you can discount the importance of cloud-based CMS. Okay, while there will always be industries and places that have security requirements such that everything must be behind the firewall, a company firewall, what have you, you will see the CMS going into the cloud. Now, the second piece of that I think is critical, and where to answer the question, besides CMS, it will be storage. Some may say, well, that is technically part of CMS, but really, your CMS, your content management, is tracking it, scheduling it, and distributing it to the players. Behind that, there will need to be a growing and very, very flexible storage solution, because you're going to just be continually growing the package of content that you have available and in the library that you have. And so, if you said, what do you see coming in cloud, I would say storage and some sort of a digital asset management solution that makes itself easily integratable and usable with content management systems that are on the market today.
Yeah, and I would say the other interesting thing about cloud is Internet of Things stuff. And I know Internet of Things is a term that almost wears people out because they hear it so much, but it's a real deal. You are going to see, and are already seeing, sensors applied to darn near everything. And in some cases, like putting sensors on water bottles, I don't get it. But putting sensors on delivery trucks, putting them on manufacturing floors, and putting them in open fields where crops are being grown, all those things make a bunch of sense. They are all connecting back through the cloud to servers and steadily spitting out data. And that data can, in the context of digital signage, trigger content, but can also shape content so that, let's say, a good example would be in Australia. Nissan works with a company and shows in its main lobby, I'm told, I haven't seen it, but I'm told, they've got a very large dashboard video wall in its lobby that shows real-time sales data. So what's going on in terms of the vehicles that they're selling around the country. Now, if you can think of that in terms of an energy company or an agribusiness company, a exploration company showing seismic activity and all that really, really interesting stuff that you could show on a display that's refreshing itself. It's content that you're going to set and establish and point to particular pieces of data and design the visualizations around it. And once it's set, it's just going to play and play and play. So you end up with real-time content, and I alluded to it also shaping content. You have cases where, based on rules that are set in terms of what that data is telling you, different things play. Some stuff comes off the system based on inventory levels, sales levels, all that. Other stuff comes on and so on. So all cloud-based data is going to be a big, big part of the future of digital signage.
Perfect. Thank you all. Thank you both for that. Well, that's the time we have for today. I would welcome you guys to continue this conversation with Mr. Haynes and Mr. Tippets. You can follow both of them across a couple of different social media channels. Dave Haynes, you can follow him at 169, and or you can find him on LinkedIn. And of course, Mike Tippets, you can follow him on Twitter at HughesMediaVP. Again, that's at HughesMediaVP, or on LinkedIn as well. Again, we thank you for your time, both to the presenters and to those who have joined us this morning, and we look forward to working with you in whatever capacity we can. Thanks, and we'll see you at DSE next year. Bye-bye.